Hello, this is the Mushroom Wizard, and today we're going to be looking at another presentation regarding the mushrooms of Saskatchewan and the way in which we go about identifying those mushrooms. So today's presentation is the fourth presentation regarding toxic species found in Saskatchewan. This is one of two presentations regarding fatal fungi. And when I say fatal, I mean mushrooms that have a high likelihood of killing you if you do not seek medical attention after consuming. So let's get started. As you can imagine, this is a presentation you're going to want to be familiar with. So the genre that we're going to be looking at include Amanita, Cortinarius, Galerina, and Foliotina. And again, just to bring it home, these are mushrooms that are toxic and are often consumed by mistake. So they do have lookalikes that are edible, and people tend to confuse one for the other. These are mushrooms that cause fatalities, and these are mushrooms that every mushroom picker should memorize. So the first species that we will be looking at are the deadly webcaps. These are Cortinarius species. So to put it into perspective, there are at least 8 known species that contain the toxin orellinine. We have at least 2 here. It's not really known how many there actually are because the Cortinarius genus comprises about 1/3 of Saskatchewan's mushrooms, and many of those mushrooms are not known, or they are based upon these 2 European species here. So having said that, many Cortinarius species look like this one of these 2 species here. Basically that dull reddish brown with the reddish brown gills underneath. And it is very difficult to tell one from the other, which is why, as a general rule, we always avoid Cortinarius species that are not purple. So let's get started here with some ID features. So the cap is reddish brown to brown in Cortinarius orellanus, and orangish brown to brown in Cortinarius rubellus. They are convex to campanulate, and if you recall, campanulate just means it has the shape of an old-fashioned bell, the kind that you would find in a bell tower. And then these flatten out and retain their umbo as they do so. The umbo is sharper in Cortinarius rubellus, and I believe what we're looking at here is actually Cortinarius orellanus. The surface is covered with fibrillose scales. So you can see that very clearly here, that it's almost shaggy. Those are just upraised scales that are soft, and they give kind of like a similar to carpet. If you were to run your finger across it, that's kind of the texture that you can expect there. The margin is slightly striate, and you can see that clearly here too. There is some striation there. And then you can see what's also happening is they're beginning to split as the margin lifts upwards. And with age, that margin can also become wavy. There is Cortinarius rubellus. You can see the orange there, and it's more flattened out. It's got an umbonate structure there, flat with an umbo. Here is a size reference for you. So about an average sized mushroom. Here's another size reference for you. This would be Cortinarius Cortinarius rubellus, sorry. You can see that sharp umbo on the left. You can also see some of these are quite wavy. So the gills are pale yellow at first, turning rusty brown with age. So this is an older specimen here that we're looking at. They're adnate, so they reach across and then dip down. Sorry, they reach across and touch the stipe. They are close to distant from one another, and here you could say they're almost subdistant in this photo. Short gills are frequent. You can see about 3 to 4 between the gills there. And then this produces a rusty brown spore print. Here you can see the Cortina. So Cortinaria species have, instead of a partial veil, they have a cortina, which is almost like a spider web that covers the gills while they're young and developing. And you can see some of that remnants there left over. And oftentimes that will turn dark reddish brown, and then those kind of remnants will remain in sort of like this hairy ring zone around the stipe. So the stipe itself is yellow streaked with red in C. orellanus, and yellow with a distinctive red snakeskin over top of it in C. rubellus. They are clavate to bulbous. You can see this one's kind of bulbous, but sometimes they'll have more of that club shape that is what we call clavate. They have a central attachment to the cap, and then they're usually bowed or curved. You can see there's a distinctive curve there, part ways up from the bottom, and then up to about 4 inches high in height and about an inch thick. And they're not the best photo, but you can see that red snakeskin pattern for Cortinarius rubellus. So in terms of the ecology, these are mycorrhizal with hardwoods and conifers, preferential to oak with Cortinarius orellanus. So you could see it anywhere in the province, but down in the Qu'Appelle Valley is where you would most likely see this, because that's where bur oak is. And then these are mycorrhizal with conifers in Cortinarius rubellus. So again, more in the northern portions there where you have spruce and pine. These are terrestrial mushrooms. They are solitary to scattered, and these are found summer through fall. These are lethal mushrooms. They have a radish-like smell, and they contain a toxin called orellanine. So what makes this mushroom so lethal is that you eat it, it doesn't make you sick right away. Symptoms actually occur 2 to 3 days, sometimes in rare cases up to 3 weeks after ingesting them. They include fever, cramps, headache, vomiting, muscle aches, thirst, painful urination, and then kidney and liver failure. Basically, it melts your kidneys and your liver. And then, of course, that's followed by death. And I think a good lot of the issue here is that people don't know that what they're experiencing is anything other than the flu until it's gotten to the point where irreparable damage has happened to both kidneys and perhaps liver, and perhaps even other parts of your body. So, as you probably know, living without kidneys or liver is fatal. So if you can't get those transplants right away, or if you can't identify that you have actually been poisoned by a mushroom in time to provide that information to ER staff, then you can very much die from this. In fact, it's likely that there are a lot more deaths throughout history that are not associated with the mushroom, or just left as unknown death, that are a result of consuming this mushroom. You don't need to eat very much of it for this to occur. So be warned when picking Cortinarius species. The next mushroom we're going to look at is far and above the most notorious of the lethal mushrooms out there. I'm just going to say Amanita section phalloides. This is the Deathcap. There are actually numerous species that go under this heading, not just one. And having said that, it is not clear if any of these are in Saskatchewan or not. This is an invasive species or group of species that occurs here, having come over from Europe with trees. Basically, they came with the trees, and they have spread, as far as I know, into Manitoba, all the way from the east coast, and they are occurring along the west coast as well. As to whether or not they are in Saskatchewan, it is unclear as of yet, but let's just say that in time, likely they will reach that point. So it's good to be familiar with them. This is also the mushroom or the mushroom type that accounts for the majority of mushroom-related fatalities worldwide. So the cap of the mushroom here, the Deathcap mushroom, is yellowish green to green, becoming darker with age, and then darkest in the center. You can see that there. It is ovoid to begin with, so kind of shaped like an oval, becoming convex and flattening out with age. Patches from the universal veil may be present when young. So when I say patches, I mean patches on the top, because this mushroom goes through an egg stage. All Amanita mushrooms go through an egg stage where instead of having their gills covered by a partial veil, they have a universal veil that covers the whole mushroom structure, almost like an egg. And eventually it rips free, but pieces of that kind of white membranous structure form patches on the top of the mushroom cap at times. So they may be on top, they may not, they may have fallen off. Sometimes they get stuck on there. The margin is smooth or appendiculate when young. So here you can see it is appendiculate. You can see portions of that veil hanging down. And it cracks in places. Doesn't usually split the way you see some splitting mushrooms split all the way almost to the center, but you can see it starting to form little tiny splits there instead of striations, just little cracks. And then these grow up to about 5 inches in diameter at their biggest. Usually they are a bit smaller than that. Here's a size reference for you. Somebody's holding a couple of them in their hands. You can see that green up top. Very distinctive color for a mushroom. So the gills are white, becoming cream with age. They are free from the stipe. You can see they're not touching the stipe at all. They are close to fairly crowded. Short gills are present. There's about 1, maybe 2 between each gill, but there's not a whole lot of them. And then this mushroom, as with all amanitas, produces a white spore print. The stipe is off-white with green streaking, and it's kind of almost got that same sort of zigzag snake pattern that we saw in Cortinarius rubellus, actually. You can see it there, very faint green. They're bulbous to what I would say is clavate. Within that, what we call a vulva there, which is the remnants of the bottom remnants of the universal veil, you would have a big bulb at the end of that stipe. And it forms a central attachment to the cap. And then these grow up to about 6 inches high and about 1 inch thick. So it has a thick skirt-like pendant annulus there hanging down. You can see how thick it is. That's left over from the universal veil. And the vulva, that is sac-like. You can see it's almost like somebody has stuck a white sac on the bottom of that mushroom stipe. And then with age, this may turn pale green. So right now we're seeing it white. Later on, it could begin to turn pale green. So this mushroom has a mycorrhizal ecology with hardwoods and conifers with a preference for oak. So again, you could see this at any point throughout the province. If it does hit Saskatchewan, or if it's already here, it's likely in the Qu'Appelle Valley or around that area along the Manitoba border in the south. These are solitary to scattered, so you're not going to see big groups of them, but it's good to know them. They are invasive and they are found summer through fall. In terms of their toxicity, these are lethal, as you can expect from being in this presentation. Now, this one goes against the myth that toxic mushrooms are going to taste and smell bad. This one is said to smell like honey when it's young. And it also has a very pleasant taste compared to that of even the best mushrooms out there. which of course is, I believe, one of the reasons why people tend to consume this mushroom and keep eating it, instead of taking a bite and spitting it out. So the initial symptoms include diarrhea, vomiting, nausea, colicky abdominal pain, low blood pressure, and hypoglycemia. And then those symptoms go away. And just like with the Cortinarius species, I do believe that this is one of the reasons why this mushroom causes so many fatalities. The symptoms go away, but damage is still being done to your body, particularly your liver. Secondary symptoms occur about 3 days later, and they include jaundice, diarrhea, seizures, hemophilia, coma, liver failure, kidney failure, heart failure, and death. So again, there's just so much happening to your body all at once. Really horrible way to go. And yeah, it would be very hard for an ER to account for all of those different types of symptoms if you didn't know it was from the mushrooms that you were eating. So the next mushroom we're going to look at is very similar. This is the destroying angel, Amanita bisporigera. This mushroom does occur in Saskatchewan. It is fairly rare, but it is very important to know. You're not going to see it often, if at all, but you don't want the one time you do encounter it to be the last. So the cap is white. It's sometimes developing a slight ivory or tan center with age. It is ovoid to convex, flattening out with age. It is smooth, sometimes with patches from the universal veil. Once again, this is an Amanita species, right? So it's going to have that universal veil when young. The margin is smooth to appendiculate. And again, this grows up to about 4 inches in diameter, so a bit smaller than the Deathcap. Here's a size reference for you. You can see that big bulb at the end of that stipe there too. The gills are white in color. They are free from the stipe. They are crowded together, fairly densely crowded actually if you look there. There are short gills present between them, and this again produces a white spore print. And you can see a little bit of that veil left over there, still stuck to the stipe. The stipe is white in color. It is bulbous. If you recall from the size reference photo there was a big ball at the end of the stipe. It has a central attachment to the cap, and then it often has this shaggy white scaling running up it. You can see that very clearly here in the photo. Again, that would be fairly soft. It would feel almost like you're touching like carpet or something like that. And then it's up to about 6 inches high and 1 inch thick. So it can actually grow quite high, quite tall. The skirt, once again, is skirt-like. Sorry, I said skirt. The annulus is skirt-like and pendant. Very thick there. And then the vulva, again, it's thick and it's sac-like, very similar to the Deathcap. And then with this one, it does not turn green, it will just remain white, as will the whole mushroom. This is where the idea that you should never pick a white mushroom comes from. Unfortunately, doing that means that you would have to avoid mushrooms like the white dapperling and oysters and other fine edibles. So this mushroom is mycorrhizal with hardwood, and it is preferential to oak. So once again, you're going to find this, most likely find this along the southeastern border of the province, but it will grow alongside other hardwoods as well. It'll just be more rare in terms of its occurrence. It is a terrestrial mushroom. These are solitary to scattered, and they are found summer throughout the fall. This is a lethal mushroom, as the name suggests. Once again, it contains amatoxins. It also contains phallotoxins. Same with the Deathcap. They are closely related. So again, same symptoms, right? And that's a whole lot of symptoms: diarrhea, vomiting, nausea, colicky, abdominal pain, low blood pressure, hypoglycemia. I mean, just a whole lot of damage to your body. And it has that delay once again where people think, you know what, maybe this poisoning wasn't so bad. 8 hours have passed, I feel fine. A couple days passed, they've forgotten about it, and then suddenly they just crash. So the next species that we're going to look at is very, very common in Saskatchewan. This is the mushroom that you're most likely to pick, in my opinion, accidentally. This is the funeral bell, Galerina marginata. So the cap is yellow to orangish tan to rusty brown. It is darkest in the center. It is convex, becoming nearly flat with age. The surface, if you run your finger across it, is tacky. Other than that, the cuticle is smooth. It's just kind of sticky. They are hygrophonous, and they will create a two-toned appearance to it if it goes from a state of being hydrated to being dry, or vice versa, because it will be different colors depending upon what state it's in. The margin is smooth, but may become faintly striate with age. And these grow up to about 2.5 inches in diameter. So not very big, but they tend to grow in quantity. Here you can see a size reference for you, and just from this you can tell that these tend to grow in large amounts, and that is what makes them dangerous, because you can often find more than enough for a good meal. Well, not a good meal, a really bad meal. Here we're taking a look at the gills. Those gills are tan, turning rusty brown with maturity. They are adnate to decurrent. Here you can see them slightly decurrent. Adnate, they would be kind of just coming across and touching the stipe, but here you can see they're actually starting to run down the stipe. The gills are close together, and there are frequent short gills, right? You can count 4, sometimes even 5 short gills between each full-length gill, and they are covered by a partial veil when young, and these produce a rusty brown spore print. And you can see a little bit of that spore deposit there, almost forming like a ring on that stipe. Here's a spore print for you, so you know what to look for. One mushroom that people tend to confuse between these two is enoki. So if you're picking enoki would have a white spore print, whereas the funeral bell here has a very dark spore print. The stipe is dark reddish brown below the ring zone, and then lighter brown above, and you can see that very clearly in these. The stipe is cylindrical in shape, and some of these look like they're a little bit swollen at the base, but not much. And then they are covered with whitish fibrils, and those disappear with age. You can see some of them still remaining on the mushroom there that's in focus. They form a central attachment to the cap, and they grow up to about 3 inches high and about a ½ inch wide. The annulus is brown and quite fragile. So every mushroom that we've looked at up till now has actually had the annulus gone. So rain or wind or just any sort of agitation is more than enough to just tear that thing off. So if it's absent, it would leave this kind of off-white ring zone with this sort of reddish-brown spore deposit, swollen sort of spore deposits ring zone. These are saprobic mushrooms. They grow directly on the decaying wood of both conifers and hardwoods, and they cause a white rot, and you can see that there as well. And then these are scattered to gregarious, sometimes clumping together in large amounts, very similar to what you'd see with like a honey mushroom or with enoki. And they are found spring through fall. So they are lethal. These contain amatoxins. That is the same toxin that we just saw in the Destroying Angel and in the Deathcap. So the initial symptoms of these would be abdominal pain, vomiting, diarrhea. Remember that these only have the amatoxins, not the phallotoxins. This is followed by a recovery period that can last up to a week. It's usually about 3 days, and there will be no symptoms during this time. Then those secondary symptoms kick in. That's intestinal bleeding, coma, kidney failure, liver failure, and death. And finally, we have the deadly dunce cap, and that's Phyllotina rugosa. So the cap is orangish brown to brown and darkest in the center there. It is convex to campanulate. If you recall, campanulate is kind of that bell shape. I wish they just called it bell shape. I wouldn't have to explain it every time. Then this flattens out. Well, it retains a central umbo of sorts, though it is kind of, as you can see, there's sort of a wrinkled version of an umbo. And it becomes umbonate, and that's basically where you have the umbo and then a flat surface beyond. It is very thin-fleshed, and that margin is striate, as you can see that there. It's also lighter in color. And it's up to about 1 inch in diameter. So not a very big mushroom. You would need several of these to get to that fatal point, but that doesn't mean it can't do a whole lot of damage in the meantime. Here's a size reference for you. So the gills are off-white, becoming brown. They are adnexed. They are close together, fairly close, and short gills are frequent. You can see some places where it looks like about 3 between each set of gills. And this is covered with a partial veil when young, and it produces a brown spore print. And there's a spore print for you for reference. The stipe is off-white above the ring, brown below, becoming darkest towards the base. This is a cylindrical to bulbous mushroom, has a central attachment. It is sometimes pruinose. So when I say it's pruinose, I mean that it has this almost like fine coating of white dust. And it grows up to about 1.5 inches high. The annulus is flaring and has a shelf-like top. You can see there, it's got a very flared out lip at the top there. This is a saprobic mushroom. They are terrestrial. They're solitary to gregarious. They will grow in most environments, so grassy environments, woodlands, etc., and fairly widespread. And then these are found spring through fall. This is a fatal mushroom if you eat enough of it. And by enough of it, I mean like perhaps 4 or 5 of them. They contain amatoxins. Once again, it has those symptoms that you would expect from the funeral bell and the Deathcap and the Destroying Angel. So I won't go over those again, but I will mention that this mushroom is often confused for mushrooms that people are picking for a psychedelic experience. That is where the danger lies here. There's not a whole lot of edible mushrooms that you could confuse this for, but magic mushrooms, definitely you could. And that's everything. There will be another presentation focusing on fatal mushrooms that looks primarily at dapperlings, so the Lepiota species. So this is the Mushroom Wizard, and I will talk to you again about dapperlings.